Hospitals are beacons of hope. They are places of healing, science, and life. During the day, their halls buzz with a controlled chaos. Doctors rush from room to room. Families wait anxiously in designated areas. Nurses orchestrate a symphony of care, their movements precise and purposeful. The air is thick with the sounds of life, the beeping of monitors, the rolling of carts, the constant hum of conversation. It is a world where every second is accounted for, where logic and medicine are the reigning kings. But when the sun sets and the visiting hours end, something changes. The hospital transforms. It becomes an entirely different world, one ruled by shadows and silence. The transition from day to night is subtle at first. The bright, clinical lights are dimmed, casting long, distorted shadows down empty corridors. The hustle and bustle fades into a low, persistent hum. Footsteps that were once lost in the daytime noise now echo with an unsettling clarity, each one a lonely note in the vast quiet. This is the world of the night shift. It is a time when the veil between the ordinary and the extraordinary feels thin. The stillness is not peaceful. It is heavy, charged with an unseen energy. It's a silence that seems to be listening, waiting for something to break its hold. This is when the stories begin. For those who work the solitary hours after midnight, the hospital reveals its hidden face. They are the guardians of this quiet, liminal space. They are doctors, nurses, therapists, and orderlies who navigate the darkened floors while the city outside sleeps. These medical professionals are trained in science and reason. They deal in facts, in vitals, in diagnoses. They are grounded in the tangible world of the living, but many of them carry secrets. They have witnessed things that cannot be explained by textbooks or medical journals. They have experienced moments that defy all logic, moments that have made them question the very nature of life and death. These are not the kind of stories shared during morning rounds. They are whispered in hushed tones in empty break rooms or shared over a late-night cup of coffee. They are tales of unexplained sounds, fleeting apparitions, and chilling encounters that linger long after the shift ends. These are the experiences that medical professionals are often reluctant to admit for fear of ridicule. But the stories persist because they are real to those who live them. They are a chilling reminder that in a place where life and death are constant companions, sometimes the dead do not rest. They linger in the quiet halls, waiting for the night. The very essence of a hospital is tied to intense human emotion. It is a place of profound joy and devastating sorrow, of miraculous recoveries and tragic losses. Every room, every hallway, every operating theater is saturated with the residual energy of these powerful experiences. Think about it. People are born there and people die there. They fight for their last breath in these beds. They say their final goodbyes in these rooms. This emotional residue doesn't just dissipate when a room is cleaned. It clings to the walls, it seeps into the floors, it becomes part of the building's very fabric, creating an environment ripe for paranormal activity. This is why so many ghost stories originate from hospitals. It is a place where the barrier between worlds seems most fragile. Medical staff are trained to be observers. They notice things others might miss: a subtle change in a patient's breathing, a flicker on a monitor, a shadow in the corner of their eye. They are attuned to the faintest signals of distress. So when they witness something that falls outside the realm of their training, it hits them with a unique force. They are not prone to fantasy. Their minds are sharp, analytical, and focused on reality. When they report seeing a figure standing at the end of a hall, or hearing a voice from an empty room, it cannot be easily dismissed. The stories you are about to hear are not legends or myths. They come directly from the men and women who have walked these haunted halls. They are first-hand accounts from credible witnesses whose careers are built on a foundation of truth and accuracy. These are people who have dedicated their lives to saving others, only to find themselves face to face with something beyond their help. These are the chilling testimonies of a respiratory therapist, a medical intern, and a student nurse. Each one of them encountered something on the night shift that would change them forever, something that defied every law of science they had ever learned. Prepare yourself to enter a world where the lines between patient and apparition blur, a world where a routine check-in can become a terrifying ordeal, where the morgue does not always signify the end of a journey, and where an empty room is never truly empty. These accounts serve as a stark reminder that some places are marked by tragedy. They remind us that even in our most modern, sterile environments, the past is never truly gone. It waits patiently in the darkness, for the right moment to make its presence known, and it always chooses the dead of night. My name is Alex. For years, I worked as a respiratory therapist, specializing in the night shift at a large urban hospital. I preferred the quiet, fewer doctors making rounds, fewer family members crowding the hallways, and most patients were asleep, or at least trying to be. The night had a rhythm of its own, a slow, steady pulse that was a world away from the frantic energy of the day. But that quietness wasn't always peaceful. There was a certain kind of stillness that settled over the hospital after midnight, an unnatural calm that always felt deliberate, as if the building itself was holding its breath. It was a feeling I could never quite shake, a low-grade hum of anxiety that became my constant companion. It was a Tuesday, a little after 2 a.m., when the tranquility of my shift was shattered. The phone at my station rang, its shrill sound cutting through the silence like a knife. It was the nurse from the cardiac floor, a woman named Maria. Her voice was clipped, strained, a telltale sign of urgency that immediately put me on high alert. She told me a patient in room 313 was desatting, his oxygen levels dropping at an alarming rate. On the surface, it sounded like a routine call, something I dealt with almost every night. But there was an undercurrent of something else in her voice, a tremor of fear that went beyond medical concern. She wasn't just worried about his vitals, she was spooked. I grabbed my portable oxygen tank and a non-rebreather mask, my mind already running through the standard protocols. As I made my way through the labyrinthine corridors, the hospital seemed to grow darker, the shadows longer and more menacing. The third floor, home to the cardiac unit, always had a particular chill to it, a sterile cold that seeped into your bones. The lighting up there was notoriously bad, a series of flickering, yellow-hued fluorescent bulbs that hummed with a low, incessant drone. Every creak of the linoleum floor echoed unnaturally, and the walls themselves seemed to absorb sound, muffling the distant, reassuring beeps of the monitors into something faint and ghostly. As I rounded the final corner toward the nurse's station, I noticed something profoundly wrong. The station was completely deserted. There was no charge nurse hunched over paperwork, no aides milling about, not even the usual clutter of charts and coffee cups. It was just an empty desk under the sickly yellow light. A chilling silence had fallen over the entire floor, broken only by the faint, rhythmic beeps from distant rooms. This was more than unusual. It was unheard of. The cardiac unit was a high-risk floor. The nurse's station was the command center, the heart of the unit. It was never, ever left unattended. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach. Something was very wrong here. I approached the door to room 313, my footsteps feeling unnervingly loud in the oppressive silence. I knocked firmly, announcing my presence. "Respiratory," I called out. There was no response from within, not a sound. I waited a moment longer before pushing the door open, its hinges letting out a soft groan of protest. The air that billowed out from the room was shockingly cold, a stark contrast to the already cool hallway. It carried the familiar, sharp scent of antiseptic, but underneath it was something else, something metallic and old. It reminded me of dried blood, a coppery tang that clung to the back of my throat and made my skin crawl. The feeling of dread intensified, morphing into genuine fear. The patient, a man named Mr. Halperin, was lying motionless in the bed. His eyes were wide open, fixed on a point on the ceiling with an unnerving intensity. The monitor beside his bed confirmed the nurse's call, its display showing a dangerously low oxygen saturation level. Yet, his breathing appeared calm, almost unnaturally so. There were no visible signs of distress, no gasping, no labored chest movements, no panicked expression. There was only that unwavering, vacant stare. He looked like a wax figure, a perfect but lifeless replica of a man. The sheer stillness of his body was more frightening than any struggle for breath could ever have been. "Mr. Halperin?" I asked, my voice sounding small and thin in the cold room. I moved closer to the bed, my rubber-soled shoes making no sound on the floor. I reached out and touched his shoulder, hoping to elicit some response. A flinch, a glance, anything. His skin was like ice. A jolt went through my arm. A visceral shock that sent a wave of nausea through my stomach. Living human tissue should not feel like that. It was the cold, clammy touch of marble, the unmistakable feel of a body that had already lost its warmth, its life. My training kicked in, overriding the panic that was beginning to cloud my thoughts. I immediately checked for a pulse at his carotid artery, my fingers pressing against his cold neck. Nothing. I checked his wrist. Nothing. His skin was clammy, his body limp. He was gone. I reached over to silence the blaring alarm on the monitor and pulled out my radio to call a code blue, the emergency signal for cardiac arrest. But as I turned back to look at him one last time, something impossible happened. He blinked. It was not a twitch or a spasm. It was a slow, deliberate blink, his eyelids closing and then opening with a surreal calmness. His chest remained still. There was still no pulse, no breath. But I swear to God, he blinked right at me. For a second, I was completely frozen, my hand hovering over the call button on my radio, my mind struggling to process what my eyes had just seen. The room seemed to darken around me, the corners filling with shadows that hadn't been there a moment before. It felt as if the very air had grown heavier, pressing in on me. A man with no pulse, no breath, no sign of life, had just looked at me. It defied every bit of medical knowledge I had, every law of biology. It was a moment of pure, undiluted horror that seemed to stretch into an eternity. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic counterpoint to the dead silence of the room. Shaking myself from the stupor, I did the only thing I could. I followed my training. I called the code. Within moments, the hallway exploded with the sound of running feet and the clatter of the crash cart. The code team, a doctor and 2 nurses, burst into the room, their faces grim and focused. I tried to explain what I had witnessed, my words tumbling out in a rush. "He has no pulse," I stammered. But he was conscious. He blinked at me. They gave me a brief, dismissive look, the kind you give to someone who is clearly overwhelmed. "Shock can do strange things, Alex," the doctor said curtly. "Sometimes the brain fires one last time." He brushed past me, his attention already on the body in the bed. The doctor performed a quick assessment, confirming what I already knew. Mr. Mady. Halperin was dead. Unquestionably. No heartbeat, no respiratory effort, pupils fixed and dilated. He was pronounced dead at 2:17 a.m. The team worked with a detached efficiency, disconnecting the monitors and preparing the body. I stood by the door, feeling like an outsider in my own experience, my heart still racing as I tried to reconcile the doctor's rational explanation with the chillingly deliberate blink I had seen. After they left, I lingered for a moment, glancing back at the empty bed. The monitor was off, its screen black, but I could still hear a faint beeping, a slow, steady rhythm like a distant heartbeat. The next night, I did everything I could to avoid the 3rd floor, but my pager went off for another patient in the same room. Room 313. This time, I wasn't going alone. I asked the assigned nurse, a woman named Clara, to come with me. She was new to the hospital, and I didn't want her to face whatever was in that room by herself. She was quiet as we rode the elevator up, but I caught her glancing at me nervously, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. As we stepped into the room, she suddenly froze at the doorway, her eyes wide with terror. "Did you see that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. She pointed a shaking finger toward the far corner, near the supply cabinet. I looked, and I saw it too. A shadow. A dark, man-shaped void that wasn't cast by anything. The shadow was a patch of pure darkness, denser than the surrounding gloom. It had the distinct silhouette of a person standing perfectly still, watching us. It didn't flicker or fade. It just hung there in the corner. A silent, menacing presence. I instinctively reached for the flashlight on my belt and aimed the bright beam directly at the corner. The light cut through the darkness, illuminating a plain, empty space. There was nothing there. No person, no object, nothing that could have cast such a distinct shadow. But when I lowered the flashlight, I could still feel it. A cold spot in the room. A lingering sense of being watched by unseen eyes. Clara was pale, her face a mask of fear. She took a step back into the hallway, refusing to go any farther into the room. We tended to the patient as quickly as we could, the sense of dread making our movements clumsy and rushed. We barely spoke, the unspoken terror creating a thick barrier between us. Later that night, huddled in the relative safety of the staff lounge, Clara finally broke her silence. "I used to work in palliative care before I came here," she said, her voice barely a whisper as she stared into her coffee cup. "Room 313. It's not right. There are stories." She told me that a patient, a young woman suffering from severe depression, had hanged herself in that very supply closet about a year ago. It happened during the night shift. No one was supposed to talk about it. The hospital had covered it up to avoid a scandal. After my shift, I tried to look it up. As expected, there was no public record, no incident report I could access. Official hospital documents were clean, but the story gnawed at me. I found one of the older, semi-retired nurses who sometimes picked up shifts, a woman who had been at the hospital for over 30 years. When I asked her about a suicide in room 313, she hesitated, her eyes darting around as if to make sure no one was listening. Finally, she nodded grimly. "It happened," she admitted in a low voice. "We don't assign that room anymore unless we're completely full. There are too many occurrences." Over the next few weeks, her words proved to be prophetic. Every single patient assigned to room 313 experienced bizarre and terrifying issues. There were sudden, unexplained breathing problems. Patients reported vivid hallucinations, seeing figures standing over their beds. One elderly man, in a fit of panic, tried to climb over the bed rails to escape and ended up breaking his leg. The most disturbing case was a young woman admitted for a minor arrhythmia. I responded to a code in her room one night to find her thrashing in the bed, gasping for air and screaming, "She's standing over me, get her away." We managed to sedate her, but she never regained consciousness. She passed away the next morning, her death officially listed as unexplained. My name is David, and this happened during my medical internship at a small, rural hospital. It was one of those old institutions where the staff was stretched thin, and interns like me had to rotate through every department imaginable. That included the morgue. I hated the morgue. It was located in the basement, a cold, sterile pocket of the hospital that felt disconnected from the world of the living above. The air down there was always heavy with the smell of chemicals, cold metal, and something else, something cloying and organic you couldn't quite name. It was a silence that felt different from the quiet of the patient floors. It was a deep, profound emptiness, as if even the air molecules had given up and ceased to move. Our training required us to assist with the transportation and documentation of deceased patients. It was a grim, necessary task that no one wanted. Even the most hardened orderlies would find excuses to pass the duty off to someone else, anyone else. But as the junior intern on the totem pole, I had no such luxury. I had no choice but to do as I was told, to face the part of medicine that everyone else preferred to ignore. The finality of it all was something you could never truly get used to. Each trip to the morgue was a stark, cold reminder of the limits of our abilities, a confrontation with the one outcome we were all fighting to prevent. One night, deep into a grueling 24-hour shift, my pager buzzed with a call that made my stomach clench. I was needed to help the night orderly, a man named Luis, move a body from the ICU down to the basement morgue. The patient had coded and been pronounced dead during the evening rounds. I met Luis outside the ICU doors. He was a quiet older man who had worked at the hospital for decades. He looked exhausted, a permanent weariness etched into the lines on his face. But tonight, there was something else in his eyes, a flicker of unease that I hadn't seen before. "Another one," he muttered, shaking his head slowly. That's the third one this week. I hadn't been tracking the numbers, but his tone sent a chill down my spine. All from the same room? I asked, a sense of foreboding creeping over me. He just nodded grimly. Room 206, you noticed that too? We began the long, silent journey, pushing the gurney through the hospital's maze of quiet, dimly lit hallways. The patient was zipped securely inside a thick, black body bag, but I couldn't help but glance at the paper tag attached to the zipper. Male, mid-40s, no known complications listed on his chart. The official cause of death was sudden cardiac arrest. Just like that, he was gone. Another life extinguished within the walls of room 206. The elevator ride down to the basement felt like a descent into another world. The hospital was old, and its machinery groaned and wheezed with every floor we passed, the sounds echoing in the small, confined space. When the metal doors finally shuttered open, the cold of the morgue hit me like a physical blow. It was a damp, penetrating chill that went straight to the bone. The morgue was even darker and more foreboding than I remembered, illuminated by a single, bare overhead bulb that flickered erratically, casting dancing shadows that played tricks on the eyes. It felt like walking onto the set of a low-budget horror film, only this was terrifyingly real. Luis went over to a small desk in the corner to sort out the paperwork, leaving me alone with the gurney. I leaned against the cold, tiled wall, trying to project an air of calm I did not feel. I was trying to rationalize my fear, telling myself I was a man of science, trained to see death as a biological process. But theory is one thing. Standing in a flickering, subterranean room with a freshly deceased body is another entirely. The silence was absolute, broken only by the low hum of the refrigerated storage units. That's when I heard it. A soft, dragging sound. A faint, dry scrape of fabric against metal. I immediately straightened up, my senses on high alert. I thought maybe Luis had dropped a pen or a clipboard, but when I looked over, he was still standing at the desk, completely engrossed in his work. The sound had come from right beside me. It had come from the gurney. My eyes locked onto the body bag, and my blood ran cold. The zipper had moved. It had only slid down by an inch, maybe two, but I knew for a fact that it had been zipped all the way to the top when we left the ICU. A wave of panic washed over me, my heart starting to pound in my chest. "Luis," I called out, my voice coming out as a shaky whisper. "Are you sure this guy was officially declared dead?" Luis walked back over, the completed form in his hand, a look of weary annoyance on his face. Time of death was 8:16 p.m., he recited from memory. I was there. No heartbeat. Vitals were flat for over 20 minutes. "He's gone." He frowned, sensing my panic. "Why do you ask?" I couldn't speak. I just pointed a trembling finger at the zipper. "I didn't touch that," I managed to say. He followed my gaze, and his expression hardened. He stepped forward and, without a word, zipped it firmly back up. "Sometimes air escapes the lungs," he said gruffly. "Muscles twitch post-mortem. It's normal." But his eyes betrayed him. It didn't feel normal. Not at all. We slid the gurney into one of the empty, refrigerated chambers. The heavy, stainless steel door closed with a loud, definitive clang that echoed through the cold room. Luis turned the handle, locking it securely. We finished the documentation in silence, the only sounds being the scratch of his pen on the clipboard and the incessant, maddening hum of the cooling units. He handed me the clipboard to add my signature, and I saw that my own hands were still trembling so badly I could barely form the letters of my name. The simple explanation he had offered replayed in my head, air escaping, muscles twitching, but it did nothing to soothe the primal fear that had taken root in my gut. Back upstairs, in the bright, sterile environment of the main hospital, the encounter in the morgue began to feel like a bad dream. I tried to push it out of my mind, to bury it under the mountain of charting and patient checks that awaited me. But around 4:15 a.m., as I was updating the patient location board, a name caught my eye. It was the same name from the tag on the body bag, the man we had just taken to the morgue, but he wasn't listed as deceased. He was listed as being in post-op recovery. I stared at the board, my mind reeling. It had to be a mistake. A clerical error. I blinked, rubbing my tired eyes, and when I looked again, the name was gone. The space was empty. I found the charge nurse and asked if she had seen anything strange on the board, if anyone had made a mistake. She just shook her head, gave me a tired smile, and told me I desperately needed coffee. Maybe she was right. Maybe exhaustion was making me see things. I retreated to the break room and collapsed into a chair, closing my eyes for just a few minutes. I must have dozed off, because I was jolted awake by a sudden, loud noise. It was a metallic clatter, a sharp, violent sound that echoed up from the floors below. It was a sound I recognized instantly. It came from the morgue. I checked my pager. No new calls, no alarms. There was no logical reason for me to go back down there. But an inexplicable force pulled me. I took the stairs this time, my heart pounding with each step, a dreadful premonition growing stronger with every floor I descended. When I reached the basement, the main overhead light in the morgue was out. The room was plunged into near darkness, lit only by the faint crimson glow of the emergency lighting. And then, I saw it. The chamber door, the one we had locked just hours before, was standing wide open. The gurney had been pulled out halfway into the room, and the body bag lying on it was completely empty. For a moment, I was paralyzed by sheer terror. My mind refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. The empty gurney, the open chamber, the oppressive, watching silence of the morgue. Every rational thought evaporated, replaced by a single, primal instinct: run. I turned and fled, not looking back, my feet pounding on the concrete floor as I sprinted up the stairwell. I didn't stop running until I burst back onto the brightly lit floor of the ICU, gasping for breath, my body trembling uncontrollably. Luis was at the nurse's station, and the moment he saw the look on my face, he knew. His own face went pale, his weary expression replaced by one of resignation and fear. "You saw it, didn't you?" he asked, his voice low and grave. He didn't sound surprised. He sounded defeated. "Where is he?" I choked out, my voice ragged with panic and exertion. "The body is gone." The chamber was open. Luis didn't answer right away. He just stared at the polished linoleum floor, as if the answer was written there. "You're not the first one this has happened to," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "That room, room 206. Every patient who dies in there doesn't stay dead. Not right away." I stared at him, bewildered. "What are you talking about?" "That's impossible." He proceeded to tell me a story that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. Over the past year, 6 different patients had died in room 206, all under strange or unexpected circumstances. Every single one of them had been officially pronounced dead, with no signs of life. And every single one of them had been at the center of a bizarre incident in the morgue. There were stories of locked chambers found open, of identification tags being mysteriously swapped, and, in 2 other cases besides mine, of bodies vanishing from their gurneys only to be found later, moved to a different, unlocked chamber. The occurrences were always dismissed as clerical errors or pranks by overworked staff, but Luis knew the truth. A week after my terrifying experience, a memo was circulated. Room 206 was being closed indefinitely for renovations. Hospital staff were told it was due to issues with the plumbing and ventilation systems, but we all knew the real reason. The room was never renovated. The furniture was removed. The number was taken off the door, and it was sealed shut. They never reopened it. It remains an empty, silent void in the middle of the 2nd floor. The official story is that the hospital simply didn't need the space. But those of us who worked the night shift, those of us who had made that long walk to the basement, we knew why that door would remain locked forever. Some places hold on to death, and whatever was in room 206 refused to let its victims rest in peace. My final year of nursing school included overnight shifts at a long-term care hospital, mostly elderly, mostly silent. The administration called it character building. They promised quiet. They didn't warn us about the kind that presses in on your mind. My supervisor, Mrs. Chuma, was all business. She told me, "Walk the East Wing every hour. Check vitals. Don't deviate." As she left, she paused. "If you see someone in the halls who shouldn't be there, stay put. Don't follow, don't ask." I thought it was a joke. Her face said otherwise. Alone under the desk lamp, her warning echoed in my head. All the patients here were bedbound. Who could possibly be walking? At 2 a.m., I started my rounds. The only sound, my shoes squeaking. Room 118, Mr. Nkosi, 6 years in a coma, unresponsive, unchanged. His room was frozen in time, the monitors beeped steady as ever. As I passed, I heard something impossible, a whisper. Not the hum of a machine, not the sigh of an old building. Whispering, from a room where no one should speak. I stopped, heart pounding. Listening to the dark, I froze, listening. The door to 118 was ajar, darkness inside. No TV, no radio, no visitors. But I heard two voices sewn near the bed, one farther away, frantic and conspiratorial. Mr. Nkosi couldn't talk. No one should be in there. I pushed the door open. The whispering stopped. Silence, except for the monitor's glow. Mr. Nkosi lay motionless except his eyes were open, focused, tracking me. His chart said, non-responsive, eyes always closed. This was impossible. He stared, aware, as if warning me. I stepped back. The monitor's steady beep flatlined into a shrill whine. I ran for help. Mrs. Chuma met me. Already knowing, room 118? I nodded. She muttered. Third time. Every time they wake, they die within minutes. The code team revived him briefly, but he died again at 2:19 a.m. I stood in the corner, haunted by those knowing eyes. Some awakenings are final. After the code, we moved Mr. Nkosi's body. The memory of his stare lingered. The next night, I walked the same rounds, anxiety twisting inside me. Room 118 was empty, but the whispering returned louder, from inside the walls. My name, repeated in a chilling whisper. I stumbled back. The lights flickered, then blazed painfully bright. At the end of the hall, a figure in a hospital gown stood, unmoving. I called out, but it didn't respond. I approached, cautious. 10 feet away, the hallway plunged into total darkness. I fumbled for my phone's flashlight. When I shone it, the figure was gone. The light snapped back on. Mrs. Chuma stood behind me, face grim. I told you, she said, don't follow them. Some warnings are meant to be obeyed. I never forgot. In the lounge, Mrs. Chuma told me the truth. Every coma patient in 118 woke up and died within minutes. After each death, staff saw a silent figure in the east hallway, sometimes a nurse, sometimes a patient, always watching. Why use the room? I asked. Not enough beds, she said, and it always comes back to 118. The next night, a new patient was moved in. I did my rounds, dread heavy in my chest. At 2:12 a.m., the whispering started. I kept walking, eyes forward, remembering the warning. The lights went out. Bare feet shuffled behind me. I didn't look back. The whispers grew louder, then stopped. The lights returned. The hall was empty. The new patient died the next day. No cause, no warning. I finished my rotation and vowed never to return. On my last night, the intercom crackled as I passed 118. A voice whispered, "You're next." I transferred to the ER. There, at least, the ghosts come with sirens. Some places never let you go. Some warnings echo forever. These stories aren't rare. Hospitals are soaked in life, death, and fear, haunted by more than memories. What happened in room 313, the morgue, and the East Wing are reminders. The veil is thin, and staff are the first to see through it. These encounters become unspoken folklore rooms, quietly closed, hallways avoided, elevators shunned after midnight. The beeping from an unplugged monitor, the whisper from an empty room, symptoms of a haunted building. The scars linger on the people who witness them. Healthcare workers trust evidence. But what if the evidence is impossible? A blink from a dead patient, a voice that knows your name. These moments shatter logic. They force us to face the unknown. The persistence of these stories proves, even in a world of science, ancient fears survive. At night, hospitals become primal spaces where barriers crumble. Haunted rooms and restless spirits are more than tales, they're testimony from those who've seen the other side. Where life ends, the story isn't always over. Sometimes it's just beginning. For the nurses, doctors, and therapists who work the night shift, learning to cope with these unsettling experiences becomes a necessary survival skill. They develop a unique set of unwritten rules, a shared understanding of how to navigate the haunted spaces within their workplace. This is not something taught in medical school. It is a curriculum learned on the job, in the dim light of a deserted corridor at 3 a.m. The first rule is often to rationalize. The sound was just the building settling. The flicker of movement was just a trick of the light, a product of exhaustion. This is the mind's first line of defense, an attempt to fit the inexplicable into a logical framework. But when rationalization fails, when an experience is so direct and undeniable that it cannot be explained away, a different coping mechanism takes over: compartmentalization. The encounter is locked away in a mental box, not to be opened or examined too closely, especially during a shift. To dwell on the terror of seeing an apparition or hearing a disembodied voice would make it impossible to function, to provide care to the living patients who depend on them. They learn to push the fear down, to operate with a detached professionalism even when their hearts are pounding with primal dread. It is a testament to their resilience that they can continue their duties in the face of such profound and personal horror. Sharing the experience with trusted colleagues is another crucial coping strategy. The hushed conversations in the break room, like the one between Alex and Clara, serve a vital purpose. They are a form of validation. Knowing you are not alone, that others have seen or felt the same thing, is a powerful antidote to the fear of being dismissed as crazy or unstable. These shared stories build a silent support network among the night shift staff. They create a bond forged in shared fear and mutual belief, a silent acknowledgement that says, "I know what you saw and I believe you." This camaraderie makes the long, dark nights more bearable. Ultimately, however, many medical professionals cope by simply accepting that there are things they cannot control or explain. They learn to coexist with the unseen residents of their workplace. They might say a quiet word of acknowledgement when entering a notoriously active room, or avoid looking too closely into the dark corners of the morgue. It becomes a delicate dance of respect and avoidance. This acceptance is not a sign of defeat, but a form of wisdom. It is the understanding that in a place so deeply intertwined with life and death, one must be prepared to encounter both, sometimes long after the heart has stopped beating. It's the quiet truce they make to get through the night. The stories of Room 313, Room 206, and Room 118 all end in a similar way, with a door being closed for good. A room is converted to storage. A wing is sealed off for renovations. A number plaque is removed from the wall, erasing the location from the hospital's official map. This act is the ultimate admission of defeat. It is the hospital administration, the embodiment of science and order, tacitly acknowledging that there is a force at play within their walls that they cannot diagnose, treat, or eradicate. It is a silent surrender to the supernatural, an unspoken agreement that some places are too broken, too saturated with tragedy, to be reclaimed by the living. These closed-off spaces become monuments to the stories that haunt the hospital. They are physical reminders of the events that staff are forbidden to discuss openly. For the new hires who ask what lies behind the unlabeled door, the simple answer of storage is a protective lie. It shields them from a truth they are not yet ready to face. The real warning is not spoken aloud. It is conveyed in the averted eyes of the senior staff, in the sudden change of subject. The warning is clear: do not ask, do not look, and do not try to open that door. Some knowledge is a burden, and the history of these rooms is the heaviest of all. These stories serve as a powerful reminder of the profound impact that place can have on paranormal phenomena. It's not just about a ghost being tied to a person. It's about the energy of an event being imprinted onto a physical location. The suicide in the supply closet, the string of unexplained deaths, the final, desperate moments of a coma patient. These events create a psychic wound on the environment itself. The room becomes a focal point, a tear in the fabric of reality where the past continuously bleeds into the present. Closing the door does not heal the wound. It simply quarantines it, hoping to contain the infection. In the end, What these chilling accounts teach us is a lesson in humility. They remind us that for all our medical advancements and scientific knowledge, we remain profoundly ignorant about the true nature of consciousness and what, if anything, comes after death. The men and women who walk the hospital halls at night are witnesses to this mystery. They stand on the border between two worlds, and sometimes something crosses over. The stories they tell are not meant to simply scare us. They are a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, and a chilling warning that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again. And if you ever hear a code alarm from behind one of them, the best advice is always the same: do not answer it.